I think Imu is in Lily's body due to the personality swap from the Ope Ope no Mi. So I've been seeing a lot of body swap theories lately, and I'm not quite sure how to feel about them. Bad, probably bad. But what if we did something weird, right? And we went the other way around. Instead of Imu being in Lily's body, what if Lily was in Imu's body and is so desperate to get back to her own that she's willing to accept Vivi's body, given that she looks exactly like her? And maybe that's why Imu stares at the portrait of Lily, like Imu's comfort action of looking in a mirror, remembering who he or who she once was. I mean, I don't think it's very likely at all, but if we're going for body swap theories, then let's really go for it. The other popular Lily idea that's gaining some traction at the moment is the Void Century love triangle, where Imu was in love with Lily, but she was in love with Joy Boy, but he was in love with just like Adventure or something. But I really don't know about a love triangle either. We've come so far in One Piece without touching romance pretty much at all, little bits here and there. But I don't know if I see Oda making the big secret behind the entire history of this planet a backdoor love story. But then again, maybe, because it could all be a setup from the very beginning with Romance Dawn. Oda's a much bigger fan of the secondary definition of romance being mystery and excitement, but look, if it ends up happening, then it would be a pretty solid pun. Akainu went from sitting and looking in one direction to standing and clenching his fist. Truly big stuff is happening. Okay, so all jokes aside, of which there are many, this is a potentially huge moment that I initially skipped over, because it may imply that Sakazuki himself knows the truth of the world. He's standing there, fist clenchingly furious at Dr. Vegapunk, and I guess it's up for interpretation and may be dependent on the translation, but to me this reads as fury, because he knows what Vegapunk still has yet to say, and furthermore, Sakazuki knows that once this information is out, his role is going to become infinitely more difficult than it already is. I guess fleet admirals knowing the truth of the world isn't unprecedented. Sengoku, for example, definitely knows a lot more than he lets on, and a lot of that could probably be explained by hanging out with Monkey D. Garp, who played with Roger in the big pirate playground. And when you're part of that friend circle, you tend to get exposed to certain hidden truths. I'd also like to note Sengoku's reaction in this chapter. He is stuffing his face with crackers, which is very similar to what Rayleigh's doing. Both of them have the same response to the situation, but with different substances. Sengoku is choosing to gorge himself, which either means that he is so incredibly comfortable that he's being extra casual about this situation, or it's nervous eating, because people are now going to start asking him a lot of uncomfortable questions. For me, my opinion personally, I think it would be a great move for Sakazuki to know at least part of the truth of the world. I don't know how he learned it, but that's not what I care about right now. I just think it would add a lot of depth to his character for Sakazuki to know the truth and understand exactly the side he's working for, but to have come to the conclusion that his justice is still the correct path forward, which is the door that Vegapunk has left open. To be completely fair, he has been completely fair to both sides in this message. He's even stated that Joy Boy had plans for all three of the ancient weapons. Now we know that those probably aren't nefarious evil plans, but the only reason why we think that is because this is a fictional story, and Joy Boy is almost certainly someone of Luffy purity levels. But if this was to happen in the real world, I think we'd all be thinking a lot differently. And because Sakazuki's real world is this fictional world, I think it's perfectly reasonable of him to know bits of what happened during the Void Century and come to the conclusion that the Ancient Kingdom isn't the side we should be fighting for. Which doesn't mean that the world government necessarily is. This is just Sakazuki's elected path towards his own vision for the future. Which is why when he hears about, say, the scholars of Ohara researching the Void Century, that rings alarm bells in the old mind brain. Because with that comes the Ancient Kingdom, and by association the ancient weapons, and so Sakazuki's natural thought is to exterminate everything in order to eliminate the chance that those weapons could ever be revived. If you think about it through that lens, Sakazuki, he has pretty reasonable concerns. He's just going about them in a very unreasonable way. But I would really enjoy it if this was the informed decision that he's made. Of course, Sakazuki isn't the first high-ranking Marine to imply that he has restricted knowledge, because Kizaru did the same thing when he commented on Luffy's Gear 5th appearance during that time when he was relevant on Egghead. Remember that? It feels like such a long time ago now. And I guess Kizaru also heard stories about the sun god Nika from Kuma, but I think there's more to it than just that, because you don't put two and two together with such little information. So it might even be an admiral and above thing, to ensure that the world's greatest military might stays on target, and it could also go a long way to explaining why Kuzan resigned from the Marines to set up shop with Blackbeard, because look, he may be unwashed villainous scum, but no pirate out there is worse than the world government, which is a fact that Kuzan knows, and at least this way he can maybe contribute to the dawn of the world in some way. In regards to Joy Boy's intentions with the ancient weapons, it's interesting to think about the main races associated with the Joy Boy, being fishmen, Lunarians, and humans. It could be that one of the ancient weapons was meant as a gift in in order to allow their societies to prosper, a sea weapon for the fishmen, a sky weapon for the Lunarians, and a funky battleship for the humans. Their creation probably required cooperation from all of these races. The Mother Flame fuel source could very well be inspired by the Lunarian flames, and fishmen already have this innate ability to speak to other sea life, so with Poseidon, we're just working on amping that up. The ancient weapons may actually be the result of the ultimate utopian cooperation, which is why they've never even come close to being replicated, because no single race has the capacity to produce this kind of power on their own. Maybe they were even created so that each civilization could defend itself adequately against the threat of the 20 kingdoms. And then the world government acquired Uranus after defeating the Lunarians and booting them off the Red Line or something, and everything went very badly from there. Lily probably went to sea with Joy Boy, betraying Imu, similar to how Vivi went with the Straw Hats. History repeating itself as if it's fate that Vivi and Luffy met. Their meeting was definitely fate. It is no accident that the inheritor of Joy Boy's will met Nefertari Lily's descendant at the very first opportunity. In fact, Vivi really is almost the first person that Luffy meets after heading into the Grand Line. You've got Crocus, he's a person, Laboon, he is a whale, and then we get hit in the face with Vivi right from the get-go at Reverse Mountain. Although that's kind of funny because if you're familiar with the meta aspects of One Piece, then you'll know that this Miss Wednesday wasn't originally supposed to be Princess Vivi. So when she met Luffy at Reverse Mountain, this wasn't some sort of genius narrative maneuver by Oda to perfectly set up the pieces of his endgame story 1,000 chapters down the line. No, the decision to make Miss Wednesday Princess Vivi didn't happen until later. But I really wouldn't be surprised if Joy Boy and Lily have a very similar story to Luffy and Vivi. Perhaps Lily set out to sea in search of a someone to help her kingdom, then found, ooh, a Joy Boy, you can help me. But I doubt it had the same happy ending as the Alabasta arc did. Because in the end, Alabasta became one of the 20 kingdoms who went to war against the Ancient Kingdom, although they were trusted with the poneglyph and elected not to live at the Holy Land of Marijois. Which I have to say, now that we know about this whole flooding business, pretty bold maneuver, Alabasta. Before, I took this as a rejection of lifestyle, but now it is a serious statement. What the Alabastans are saying is that we would rather drown than give up who we are. Because, as it's famously said during Alabasta, a kingdom is its people. And whatever's living up there in the Holy Land can barely be described as people, and therefore barely be described as a kingdom. I'm pretty sure that this is the first time we have seen Imu say something. I got a lot of comments about this, and I guess the structure is a bit confusing. There's a series of panels with Imu and also dialogue. The dialogue doesn't belong to Imu. I believe it's actually coming from the very first panel, where the crowd is shouting at Dr. Vegapunk, and then when we cut to Imu, we are still hearing those people, or I guess that one guy. Because it really doesn't make any sense for Imu to be saying any of these things. But we have seen Imu speak, and it was, I was gonna say very recently, but with all the breaks, it really wasn't, so fair enough if you forgot. But during the Reverie flashback of this arc, one of the many flashbacks of Egghead, Imu did unambiguously speak and even went on a huge rambling monologue. Have you noticed that order characters like Marines and government rarely laugh? And pirates laugh very often. Evil laugh, but still. So I think this is a very solid point to bring up. Thinking back on most Marines in One Piece, they tend to have these very serious and stoic vibes. Your classic example would be Smoker, where the dude perpetually looks like he's taking a real difficult dump. But the Marines in general are very straight-faced characters, and surely that has to be intentional within the fabric of the story to serve as an opposing force to Joy Boy, Nika, and Luffy, whose purpose is to spread all of the smiles and laughter. Whereas the Marines, in opposition to that, exist to suck joy from the world. Not from their perspective as Marines, but that's what the world government uses them for. There are of course exceptions here and there, such as Monkey D. Garp, but he's probably not a great example because to some degree he also carries the will of Joy Boy. I think a better example would actually be to bring up Sengoku again, because during the first half of One Piece he seemed incapable of laughter because he was the head of the fun police. But then after retiring and no longer being at the helm of said police, all of a sudden he can't stop laughing. And then you look at the other side, the pirates, the filthy pirates. With Joy Boy officially being known as the first pirate, I think it makes a lot of sense for piracy in general to have taken after him. Because no matter what kind of pirate you are, laughter seems to be key to your adventure. It's much harder to think of examples of pirates who don't laugh, the serious stoic pirates. What even are they? Because even the ones on the much more serious end of the scale, like Sir Crocodile, laugh very often with his And probably the most serious pirate I can think of is Charlotte Katakuri, but piracy really isn't his mission. He's more about protecting his family and safeguarding his territory, and so I feel like he actually has more similarities with the behavior of the Marines than he does with pirates. But in general, I think that's a very solid observation, and Oda does think very carefully about even the simplest of things, such as who does and who does not crack a smile. Honestly, that one panel of Kaku looking sad at Stussy calling him a friend was real hard-hitting to me. I mean, mate, Kaku looks absolutely heartbroken because he's empathizing with Stussy's predicament, probably because he considered her a friend as well. It's an extremely rare interaction we're seeing here, because Cypherpol agents are quite often literally bred to be these emotionless tools of the world government. And I think one of Egghead's many accomplishments has been humanizing the previous Cypherpol agents. During Water 7, they, and Rob Lucci especially, were depicted as the coldest, no-nonsense murder machines you could possibly find. There was even an argument to be made that at the time they were simply evil. However, since then, Oda has consistently shown us that CP9 don't even scratch the surface of evil in this world. And if anything, most of them are comparatively on the good side of the full spectrum. And I also have to mention this. I got a fun comment saying that Stussy wants to save Kaku for a very peculiar reason, which is that this girl has a taste for giraffes. On Whole Cake Island, Stussy was able to sample one of Charlotte Smoothie's drinks, which was weird screaming giraffe. And Stussy, well, she was quite enamored with the flavor. And that is a drink that she will never be able to find anywhere unless she brings Charlotte Smoothie a giraffe. The biggest joke is that Rayleigh got into the ship coating business the moment he found out the world is going to sink. Actually, the joke, it goes so much further than that, because Rayleigh also became a champion swimmer. He swam pretty much all the way to Amazon Lily. And look, if I knew that the world was likely to flood, then I would probably invest in leveling up my swimming skills as well. Meanwhile, fellow Roger Pirate alumni Crocus took up residence in a whale, which would also be a pretty decent hangout spot should the world be subject to another great flood. And I'd really love to know what the other former Roger Pirates are doing, because there does seem to be a theme of preparing for what's to come. Several comments also pointed this out, and this isn't how I saw it, but there is another way of looking at the final page of Rayleigh, which is the more classic alcoholic idea of he knows the truth, and the reason why he's drinking himself into a stupor is one of cope. I don't get that from him at all, though. I think that Rayleigh has always been such a huge source of positivity, and if he saw this situation as hopeless, then he never would have bothered training Luffy at all. Although I do have to admit that the laughing, jokey, drunk nature of telling Vegapunk not to ruin the fun for the next generation, you stuffy old applehead, does appear in pretty startling contrast to the horrors happening in the world right now. For example, Rayleigh's words, and especially his actions, probably wouldn't go over very well with, say, Moda, whose whole island was just destroyed. To think that there were people who knew the truth about this world and then did nothing about it except periodically get drunk, I probably wouldn't feel amazing about that if I was Moda. Not that there's a whole lot the Roger Pirates could have done to stop it, I guess, but the fact is that they didn't even try. Or more accurately, it doesn't look like they've tried. But me personally, I see a lot of hope in Rayleigh, and I have faith that there is a very good explanation for the inaction of the Roger Pirates coming down the line. What I like about Ray's "don't be an arse and steal the spotlight" is that it's a similar thought process to Roger's last words, encouraging people to go out and find the truth of the world with their own hands, instead of having it dumped on their lap by an apple man. Interesting, I actually read Vegapunk's message as quite the opposite. As much as possible, he is presenting his findings in a neutral, inconclusive way. Vegapunk definitely has his own personal opinions on these matters, and he could have made the choice to dump those opinions on the world. But with this method, he's encouraging people to be inquisitive and seek out their own answers. It's almost like he's the scientific equivalent of Roger. Roger started the great age of piracy by promising a great treasure that you had to find with your own hands, and now Vegapunk could be sparking a great age of curiosity by promising a great truth and encouraging the world to research and form their own opinions and find that truth. To not just believe whatever the world government or a big bird tells you, or even what he, Apple Man, tells them. And as much as he is telling them, and it's a lot, Vegapunk is continuously reiterating that this is not the full truth and that further work needs to be done. And that is a call to academic adventure. Can't wait for Buggy's infamy to skyrocket even higher, since he and Shanks are the only two publicly active Roger Pirates remaining. That's right, the world already knows that Buggy was a member of the Roger Pirates, so now people are going to be looking to him as the man with all the answers. Obviously, he has none because he didn't go to Laugh Tale, but not having any substance to offer has never stopped Buggy before. He could easily say something like, "I, Clown, will reveal the truth of the world when the time is right." That time being when I, Clown, set foot on Laugh Tale and become the Pirate King. And people will look to Shanks as well, but he's much less flashy and more unlikely to use this information to his advantage. Probably because he doesn't need any more advantages. Shanks is very much the opposite of Buggy. He is all substance and no flash. The dude probably couldn't sell water to people in a drought because he's not concerned with his image and his marketing campaign to become the Pirate King. Whereas then you have Luffy, who is this perfect mix of style and substance, which is why he is the captivating Joy Boy. I do wonder if this could have effects on the other Roger Pirates though, the ones currently in a state of retirement like Crocus, because people are now going to be extra keen to track them down and learn the truth. So Vegapunk may very well have made them targets. Not that they can't handle themselves, but we've gone from a world where no one cares about these old fossils of histories to one where these fossils could be the key to having a future, as opposed to everyone dying, and potentially even to one of extreme blame. Because if you buy at face value that the Roger Pirates learned this truth and decided to ignore it, then it really doesn't reflect well on that legacy. Although we all know that's not going to be how things turn out, and to see how the things do in fact turn out, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feeds.